Okay, brilliant. So we are going to kick off. So hi, welcome to today's session. So today's session is going to focus on how the MA in Educational Leadership in Practice is an investment in your future, and how this course is going to enable you to become a leader within education. So first of all, again, a big welcome to you all who've joined us. But second of all, thank you for expressing an interest in this course. Alex and I work very closely together. So Alex is the course director, and he's going to be talking you through the course content, the structure, and how it can really aid your career in today's session. My role is your course advisor. So I act as someone who is your support from the very early stages of kind of making a decision about taking the next steps in your academic and professional career. So I've actually spoken to a number of you on the call or listening to us live today. So welcome to those of you and all of you who are interested in finding out more about this course. A little bit about my background. I've got 5 years of experience within student recruitment and support and higher education. And here at the University of Manchester, I manage a variety of different online and blended learning courses. And obviously the MA in Educational Leadership in Practice is one of those courses. So I'm responsible for delivering online events such as this one with Alex and other members of the academic team, which is fantastic. And I'd strongly encourage you to check those out on our YouTube channel and the university portal, because all of those online events are super insightful. So please do check those out. I'm also responsible for conducting individual consultations with prospective students, like you guys listening to us live and kind of watching us back as well. That's a part of my role that I really enjoy. So it's a part of this whole process that I'd encourage you to kind of contact me, because what I can do is review your profile in a lot of depth and detail, and I can walk you through the course, but also talk you through your motivations and whether or not I feel that this course is going to be the right move for you in your career. So please do get in touch with me. My role from this point onwards is to support you and guide you through the application process and the journey that you're about to take, but also when you're on the course as well. So Alex, I'm going to hand over to you just to introduce yourself, but for those of you listening live, please do utilize the chat function. If you've got any questions, we would love to hear from you, and we try our best to cover those questions at the end of today's event. But Alex, without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you very much, Daisy. Well, welcome everybody to this webinar. As you can see, my name's Alex Gardner-Mctaggart, but commonly known as Alex Mctaggart. In publishing, it's Gardner-Mctaggart. Often difficult having a name with 42 syllables, so Alex Mctaggart is often better. I've been with the Manchester Institute of Education since 2000, since the 1st of January 2019, so it's come up for 2.5 years now. And before that, I was at the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst, where I was a senior lecturer in leadership. And prior to that, I worked as a middle manager in an international school. And prior to that, I worked basically internationally in different parts of the world, always in education. So in this international, in this master's degree, you'll be looking at all sorts of different topics that are very relevant to today's educators, and especially to leadership. And as part of the Manchester Institute of Education, should you decide to be a part of our institute, you'll be joining the oldest Department of Education in the United Kingdom, and with that, possibly the oldest in the world. It was founded in 1904. So we have an enormously strong legacy of providing rigorous education for educators. Now, you have to be clear that since about the 1980s, the 1990s, the role of an educator has slightly been compromised by moves to turn teacher education into teacher training. And there are this is a sort of deprofessionalization of the role, if you like. And we strive very strongly in the Institute against that trend seeing educators as their own empowered intellectuals, their own critical thinkers, people with agency who are truly professionals in the real sense of the word professional, meaning that they are part of their own creative and executive processes. So they are a bigger job description than many people would think. And so that's what our master's degree is all about. And notable educators that we have, such as Professor Helen Gunther, who you may know if you've Googled anything about educational leadership. Helen basically wrote the book on educational leadership. Dr. Stephen Courtney as well, but also Dr. Paul Armstrong, Dr. Stephen Rayner. So we're the main leadership cluster on this degree. I think we can go to that. Yes, good, the next slide, right. So yeah, when you're looking at educational leadership, you have to also consider your motives. What draws you to educational leadership? Are you already in that position and you want to learn more about it? Or are you ambitious and you want to move up to that type of role? Many people have, there are different reasons why people get into educational leadership. Of course, the best reason to get into it for our students and for our children and the people under our care is because we believe very strongly in education. So all the other things, the peripherals that go with it, the higher remuneration, the kudos and respect that potentially comes with it, these things ideally should be secondary to your search towards moving up in this sector. Because education is about developing children, it's about developing adults, it's about building capacities within people. And that is in many ways a long and selfless process, and it's not one that can be very well monitored, calculated, added up. It's not something that you can put in a spreadsheet very well. Children don't fit well on a spreadsheet. But you notice that all around you, people try and do that all the time. And that is not what education is necessarily about. Education is, it gives discrete knowledge in subject areas. So it teaches us particular things, all different subjects, doesn't it? And of course, now we see a big trend of reducing subjects, of, whittling them down to what people might call, subjects for job capital or for, back to basics type things. So these are all kind of narratives that come out of this idea that, what's good for business is good for everything. And that actually, if children are very good at literacy and very good at numeracy, then they're going to be very successful in the workplace, despite the fact that all the research shows us that it's those other subjects like public speaking through drama, developing confidence in music, learning team skills through sports, learning about where you are in the world in history, or what it is to be a human being through, the sciences. All these things are vitally important to building a rounded person. And that's essentially what education should be about, and is increasingly not. And so good educational leaders should be people ideally who are able to foster those things. Yes, education facilitates skills too. It educates for citizenship. So we actually turn out the next generation of citizens who, if you live in a democracy, will be able to go to the ballot box and with their ballot be able to choose who is the next person to run the country. But if the education system is not providing that kind of holistic all-round education, then the person who's making the choice is not going to be in a very good position to make that choice, are they? It's because if Joe down at the cafe house says, oh, I think you should do this, that's probably what they'll do because it's the last thing they remember. What an awful situation that would be. And as we see the decline of democracy happening in the West, this is probably what we're seeing as a result of reductions in these types of education. Because what school does is it forms the social being. So Ivan Illich wrote a book in 1971 called Deschooling Society, which is definitely worth a read. And he says in that book, this is one of his quotes on the left here, school is the advertising agency which makes you believe that you need society as it is. So that's why governments and countries and nations have a very strong hand usually in shaping education in schools, because if you leave your school and you've been led to believe that this is how things should be, then you will possibly replicate that. So education goes much further than just educating for skills and for competencies. It also forms the social being, and we as educators are instrumental in that process, and that's part of the great responsibility that we bear upon us. And understanding that is central to a leadership position in education, not whether you can do a balance sheet, not whether you can run a meeting well. It's possibly a much deeper and more societal thing that's important here in educational leadership, because it's an endeavor that's focused around human development. Education is about people, and education is, and we believe this very strongly, a social practice. So I think we can move on to the next slide, probably. Right. So what is educational leadership and what are we responsible for? So for many people, leadership is power, right? But leadership is also influence. So that's one of the key things about leadership, is that if you lead, you influence other people, don't you? But you can lead other people by, you know, threatening them with a sword or a knife, can't you? You know, as happened a lot historically. You can be a big king or a warrior, and that's how you lead. But you can also influence with a smile. You can also influence by talking to someone. So if we accept that leadership is influence, then the next step is to think, how do I want to influence? What are the tools that I have at my disposal? And very often you'll find the tools you have at your disposal is your very person, is yourself, is your own humanity. It's your humanity that makes you connect with other people. And by that rationale, it's then your humanity that influences people. So this means that central to the process of leadership is being an authentic person, being connected to other people. Yes, it kind of connotes power as well. Leadership is always very close to power. And this is why leadership discourses can be quite complex, because very often power is involved in them. When people have power, they never want to relinquish power, for example. People try and strive for power. Power is something that is quite alluring. We want to have power. And so leadership is often seen as one way towards power. But then wise leaders are often people who distribute their power, who give power to others, because they empower other people. So leadership requires followers, doesn't it? But then are the followers of leaders not also leaders themselves at other times? This is an interesting dialectic that we explore a lot in the course, is how leadership manifests all around us every day. We could say that leadership originates from elitism, which it certainly does. Again, I mentioned earlier on kings and you know, princes and whatever were formerly the leaders, weren't they? So it comes from a place of elitism and privilege, but now in a postmodern world, in the 21st century, in the age of globalism, we experience this quite differently sometimes. Leadership doesn't necessarily have to be elitist, but it has its origins there. And that's a very, very important point to always keep in the back of your mind. Knowledge generation of leadership is largely found in the business sector. So most people, when they want to know how to do leadership, you know, they'll pick up a business book of, this is, you know, 27 successful tips for leaders, or 3 ways to get your leadership practice through. And there are lots and lots of products like this on the market, which are written to be kind of quick solutions to very, very complex problems. And that's part of the weakness of these kind of business knowledge generation, is that A, it's not applicable to education, because education is quite different, and B, it seeks for quick solutions to complex problems. working with young people and children, there is no quick solution really, generally. Usually the processes that we're all used to, they're involved and they're complex and they're individualized, and they take a long time, and they take a lot of feeling and empathy and personality. And so this is often quite difficult when we look at the models and practices of leadership, which are all rooted in education. So as educators, we often have to strive quite hard to make our own voices heard, that educational leadership is something different from things like business leadership. And you'll be happy to know there is a broad and healthy growing field of educational leadership. And that would be something that you would become a part of were you to come into our master's degree. So people are leaders at different times in different contexts. Well, that's absolutely true, isn't it? Look around your schools or your colleges and nurseries or your businesses. Look around your family. Look around the people that you know. People lead at different times. Usually, or very often they'll lead based upon competency, won't they? Like somebody will decide, oh, tonight I'm going to cook dinner, and they'll go and do it. And the next day someone else might say, oh, today we're going to go out on a mountain bike ride, and they'll lead that. And then someone else might say later, oh, now I'm going to help you with your homework, and someone might lead on that. So you all lead at different times, but for some reason we humans are very attached to this idea of attaching responsibility and positional authority to one particular person. Now, why is that? When all the practice we see around us tells us that it's actually quite different from that. So then what we try and do is we go, oh, well, for these different roles, we'll make different leadership positions, but even within them, leadership is in flux, isn't it? That's a very interesting, I'm sure you can imagine, very interesting conversation to be had around that. So leadership is also a top-down term, which means that in leadership studies, you talk very often about bottom-up and top-down. So leadership, when we think of it, we think of someone up there or some group up there directing influence down here to a bunch of people. Does it have to be like that? Well, by invoking the word leadership, we automatically bring with us associations of a top-down practice. Okay, we can probably switch now, Daisy. Sorry, Daisy is the controller here. She has all the power.
And I think there's a slight delay, Alex. So I'm tapping, and then it's not going forward. So.
Okay. Right. So, do you want to do this bit, Daisy?
Yes, I will. We can do. If you want to chip in, by all means do. Right. So, the next enrolment date for this course is September 2021, but that's for our Manchester and Dubai centre. We do have a centre in Shanghai, and the next enrolment date for our Shanghai centre will be in February 2022. If you are interested in the Manchester centre, which is obviously where I'm based, please do get in touch with me. My email address you can find at the bottom of your screen. If you're interested in any of our other centres, by all means get in touch with me, and I can introduce you to our wonderful recruitment teams in those regions, and they can kind of walk you through the process with regards to kind of their location, so either Dubai or Shanghai. The duration of the course is 24 months, so it's 2 years. It's a part-time blended course, so the course is split over 2 years essentially, and with it being a blended course, what we mean by that is there'll be interactive online study throughout your degree, and predominantly throughout the entire of your degree really. But the blended aspect is the conferences, so the face-to-face workshops that we offer as part of this degree program. Now, for our September intake, they'll be available in either Manchester or Dubai. So whichever centre you apply to, the ones closest to you, you will then attend workshops, hopefully, fingers crossed, in a face-to-face format. Obviously, the world is kind of turned upside down, as we all know, over the last 12 months. So we have had to move those workshops into a virtual format, which actually, and Alex will probably agree with me here, have worked really well. Our students have really enjoyed the virtual format because we've had to. I mean, there's still plenty of time and opportunity for you to network, even in that virtual way. But hopefully, let's keep our fingers crossed, they can happen face to face. So you'd come on to campus either in Manchester or Dubai. you'd experience the campus, you'd meet the academic team, you'd meet Alex, and most importantly, you'll meet your online cohort. So you'll meet like-minded individuals with similar goals to yourself, and you can really kind of build your network and strengthen your network, which we believe as an institution will enable you to, one, gain that competitive edge to take kind of your career to the next level, but just to kind of strengthen your knowledge and connections as well. The course, so the MA in Educational Leadership in Practice, is delivered in collaboration with the Manchester Institute of Education. We recommend on average for our students to kind of commit to around 20 hours per week of study. So to give you a bit of context, and I'll talk a bit about our students a bit later on in this presentation, but all of our students, or more or less all of our students, are working full-time professionals. So they will be working alongside taking this degree program, and it's manageable for them. So some students like to kind of spend some time over a weekend or on an evening working through the content that we upload for you onto that virtual learning platform. But it's doable for working professionals, so you won't be alone in kind of managing your time like other students are currently. The course, and some of you may be quite happy to know that we don't have any exams for this degree program, but you will be assessed through different kind of reflective and practical assessments, which will combine theory and practice together as one. Alex, is there anything you want to add, or have I missed, or is there anything?
No, that's great, Daisy. Thank you. Very well explained.
No
Now that
problem.
we had a quick question here, and that's a very pertinent one. And the question was, the question was, how many hours of the 20 hours per week are face-to-face, right? So, and I've written to the chat here, it's a blended program, right? So you have to bear that in mind. Now, blended is you get the best of the online component and of the face-to-face component. The face-to-face is achieved in 3-day conferences that we hold. So if you're in Manchester, you come to the university for 3 days, and you have a rather intensive 3 days of various contributors, mostly are specialists and experts in the field of education, who will then do basically deliver teaching sessions to you, and that's where you get your face-to-face activities. You get to meet all of the faculty, especially the sort of big names, and you get to work and interact with them and get to know them, which is really helpful further on down the line when you're then in their units and then they're assessing you, because you can put a name to a face and you know who they are, and so the communication is really helped that way. We have 3 tutorials per unit. There's usually 2 units in one semester, so that's a total of 6 tutorials over one semester, where you then have a face-to-face online, similar to this, but a bit more kind of interactive than this. And then the online side of that is a bespoke built Blackboard oriented platform, which aligns also with a couple of other things like PebblePad Portfolio and some other things, which has been built especially for this course. We've developed it over the last 3 to 4 years, and it's absolutely new. It's not a reinvention of anything, which many times these degrees can be. And so it's actually very interactive, very helpful platform where you get to sort of engage in your master's degree. And so we don't just basically throw a book at you and say, read that and come back in 6 weeks' time. It's a very interactive process, built with our own experts in the field of blended education and online education, such as Dr. Drew Whitworth, who you would meet. So that's a brief outline of how the course runs. I've got another question here. I am interested in a PhD. Can that be made available? Well, that's not the usual process, Maurice, to make a PhD available to you. If you are interested in a PhD, then we welcome your proposal for a PhD, in which case you should then provide a PhD proposal and send it to a supervisor who you may identify as being allied to your interests within the university. Look at our pure research pages. You'll be able to see then which of our academics have which specialisms. Now, I can see we're on to the next slide here now. How can this help you in your career? I'll do this, shall I, Daisy?
Yes, if you wouldn't mind, Alex, that would be great.
Right. So how can this help you in your career? Well, you wouldn't be here if you didn't already have a pretty good idea how this can probably help you in your career, but let's go through it point by point. This degree is designed to give you the tools to be a principal, a head, a board member, an NGO leader, an administrator, a middle manager, and a policymaker. So any one of those job titles and more will profit significantly from this degree. After your master's, well, you know, it sounds kind of like taken for granted, but it's a really big one here. This kind of master's degree reinvigorates your practice. You know, if you've been in the profession for a long time, you may at times, you know, be a bit weary of what you do. And this kind of master's degree just reconnects you with why you do it and the wonderful things about it and how interesting it is. It also elevates your own goals potentially. You know, maybe you'll sort of sight higher, seek to go further, helps you in those interviews where you walk into the interview knowing the terminology, you know the research, you have the confidence to speak about it in your own terms, from your own work. And so that puts you in a very, very strong driving seat position in terms of managing your own career and putting it where you want it to be. It's also the kind of master's degree that, because of the way it is and the way it's been structured, and it's focused solely on leadership, which you might have noticed. It's not management and leadership. It doesn't have a postgraduate level component on general education and then one on writing a thesis and then a bit on leadership. It is in its entirety focused on leadership, written and developed by some of the world leading experts in educational leadership from a world leading university. So this is the kind of MA that takes your CV right to the top of the pile. It also gives you the chance to be the change in your education organization, to be able to stand up and say, this is what I want to do, this is what I believe, and this is why. It grows a network as well, because you participate in group and online discussion forums with our very, very wide network of people like you, but also people like us. It gets you to know people, but not in a way that's antagonistic or competitive, as you might experience in the workplace. The network building that goes on here is based upon the altruistic ideas of education, of helping each other out, of collaborating, and that sort of connection that you get with people as students, as co-conspirators, as it were, working your way forward, is a strong and powerful bond throughout your career. You'll also have your chance to develop your network skills with all of our academics and our specialists, and then also policymakers and public speakers, public figures from around the world. The skills you learn, well, I mean, first and foremost, intellectual skills. You'll be critically examining and analyzing educational leadership and all the perspectives that go with it. You'll be looking at the social science of educational leadership, how people work, what makes them tick, how they are influenced, what strategies work in schools, what don't, and in colleges and in nurseries and in universities and in general educational contexts. You'll learn practical skills because you'll learn to apply your research findings to your own workplace and your own country and your own situation. So we won't put you in a situation where you're thinking up imaginary scenarios where you're in somebody else's country or having to think about it like that. It's about you, it's about your context, and that's part of the degree. That's why it's called in practice, because it continually reconnects with what you do and combines the theory of educational leadership with your practice. And it's a very powerful synergy between those two things that then develops the change within you. And also you get a whole bunch of transferable skills as well, personal qualities. So these are things like, you know, being conceptual, being analytical, having communication skills and information handling. But we often, again, take these things for granted. We go, oh, I'm educated, I'm a teacher, I have great conceptual and analytical skills. And then we forget to challenge ourselves for a very long time because it's always demanded of us as teachers that we deliver. We're always on send. We're always giving. But when do we get the chance to challenge ourselves and grow our own competencies? And that's what this degree does for you too, is it grows your own competencies. It challenges you to rethink how you do things and rethink who you are in your own professional identity and what you want from what you're doing. And it does it based upon the most up-to-date theory and practice around. Right.
Great, thanks, Alex. Before we move on to kind of the next couple of slides, which I'd really appreciate if we could just whiz through, I've had a question which I think is probably quite a good one to pitch to you at this point. I've had a question come through from someone asking, with a vision of moving into a headship role, would doing the MPQSL be more beneficial? Would this course support doing the MPQSL post MA?
Yeah, so they're kind of different qualifications, really. So the MPQSL is much more of a professional qualification. It's very limited in its intellectual remit because it's about, you know, that kind of very functionalist nuts and bolts. This is what you need to do in this role. And it's also quite prescriptive as well in sort of basically telling you what you need to do in order to be that kind of person. But because it's what it is, it's very attractive to a lot of people because people see that as being necessary for their career progression. If you're based within the UK, it's probably a good idea to do it. If you're based internationally, by the way, we have a lot of internationals on our program, so I'm saying this for their benefit. But that's probably not important to do the MPQSL. You can do it either way. I mean, you could do one. You're in the UAE, then you probably, I mean, I don't know why you'd want to do the MPQSL. You probably want to do an MA in educational leadership, but don't take my word on it. I'm obviously going to be biased, right? Because it's my MA program. And so I'm going to say do the MA. But in my honest opinion, I think, in fact, I know that you would get a great deal more out of the MA program because it's much more of an educational process. It's about developing you and developing your mind and your thinking and your practice. And it's, I mean, this is the great thing about being in a place like Manchester. There is plenty of provision for you as well. And you get to work with, you know, world-leading people in their fields. So these are all very, very, I would say, tantalizing attractions to an MA program of this kind. The other qualification that you're mentioning might just be a bit more functional than that, you know. I hope that answers your question. It's probably not the best answer I can give.
Thanks, Alex. That's great. So the next couple of slides are going to focus on what to expect in semester 1 through to semester 4. Now, Alex, could we quickly run through these next few slides? Would you mind? Just conscious of time.
Have I waffled again, Daisy? Okay. So these are some of the units that we've got on, in fact, all of them, I think, on the MA. So in your first semester, these would be the first 2 units that you take. So the first semester would start off with a conference of 3 days. If you're in Dubai, UAE, Middle East, you go to that center. If you're in Shanghai, you go to that center. If you're in Hong Kong, you go to that center. And if you are in Manchester, you go to our Manchester center for 3 days. Then you do models of educational leadership that introduces you to the theory of educational leadership and makes you or provokes you to think beyond it, to start thinking, knowing and becoming cognizant of all of that, to think beyond it and develop your own leadership practice. Engaging with educational leadership research is a research-based unit which develops your skills in how to do, for example, literature review, or how to understand what some basics of philosophy and social theory are in educational leadership. Then in semester 2, your first unit is leading educational change and development. Focus on leading educational change. So many people would say leading is about change. Some people would say it isn't. it's a vital component of educational leadership. That's then followed by educational leadership policy, a very important part of piece of knowledge for educational leaders, because we're all affected by it. We are all masters or servants of policy, and understanding how policy works and the implications it has upon young people's lives is enormously important. It's a brilliant unit, that one. It's comes originally from Helen Gunter's own work on policy. And then the final mandatory unit is educational leadership as a social practice. It's a lovely unit, that one. It's run by Dr. Stephen Rayner, and that one is developing your collaborative processes to understand how to get the most out of people by engaging cooperatively with colleagues and growing competencies of leadership within everybody within the group. Then the optional units that you can then choose, that's then in semester 3, your last one. You can either choose digital media and information literacy, that's run by Dr. Drew Whitworth. That's the actual title of that is more digital leadership in education. It's about how the digital world has changed the way that we deliver leadership and that we experience leadership, and the opportunities and the restrictions that we experience there. Fascinating unit, that one. Leading Learning is not on offer at the moment, and the International School Leadership one is one that I lead. That's about leadership in international schools. Not much is known about that, and I happen to be one of the few people who is focused his research upon that. So that's a very, I would say, of course, wouldn't I? That's a lovely unit, very interesting, especially for people working internationally, because in international schools, leadership is actually really quite different from what you might expect it to be. Then we have the Research Skills Suite. That's in your last semester. That's those are 3 little units on developing your research skills, and that's then followed by the final project. Now, often the final project is a big thesis-sized hunk of a piece of work. Most of our masters are like that, with 15,000 words or something. This is about half that, and it's also much more focused upon your professional practice. So yes, it is a scholarly, rigorous piece of work, but at the same time, it's one that is geared towards your professional practice. So it's not overly ivory tower scholarly academic, whilst it has all those attributes, but it's also meant as a professional development tool for you as well. How are we doing for time, Daisy? We okay?
We're doing well now. I made you speed up slightly, Alex, but we're on track now. So thank you for that, and I hope for our audience that provides you with a kind of a quick intro into the type of units and modules that we offer and what you can really expect throughout each semester. I would advise either getting in touch with me or the recruitment contact in your regions, who can kind of provide you with a brochure and a bit more of an in-depth insight into those units and the next kind of 2 years and what you can expect. So just before we wrap up, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of our current students and kind of who they are really, because you're all probably still in and are in the very early stages of making a decision about whether or not an MA is the right kind of step for you. We know that postgraduate study is a huge investment in your time, so you want to be absolutely sure that you are making the right decision. So I think it's really important. We've got the voice of our student now. I think it's really important to hear from our students as well. So you can see a quote here from one of our current students, Lisa. So she is a CEO and college lead at Project Inc., which is based in the northwest of the UK in Manchester. Her aspirations and kind of her idea about why she's joined this course. So she said that my aspirations are for my organisation to continue to innovate and offer the very best for her students. And she believes that in order to enable that vision, she thinks that the MA in Educational Leadership in Practice is going to improve her knowledge and help her to create policy, structure, ethos and culture within her organisation. So that's kind of her idea and thinking about behind whether or not this course it was for her, and hopefully we will be able to help her reach that vision. Now, a lot of our students all share the same kind of end goal and passion. A lot of them, or the majority, are looking to move into a leadership position within their educational organisation. Some of them, and probably all of them actually, are looking to progress in their current career or potentially looking for a change of career. All of them, though, and I know this, are looking to lead with confidence and make a real impact in where they're currently positioned. And they believe, and we believe, that this course will provide our students with the confidence to tackle challenges that are kind of happening in their educational settings. And finally, really, all of them, and this leads me on to the final slide shortly, are looking to kind of grow and build their network of global educators. And that's done through discussion platforms that we offer you via the virtual learning environment that you'll learn from, but also through those blended face-to-face workshops. This leads me on to a quote or a testimonial from Martin, who is now in his second year. And I just wanted to highlight this because the conferences, as Alex has mentioned previously, are an integral part of this degree, and they're really, really important for students, again, to kind of develop professionally and personally as well. So just to read this out to you, Martin said that the conference, which is held twice every year, has given him the opportunity to meet the lecturers and network with other professionals on the course. It's offered him the opportunity to discuss different leadership discourses from across the world, which has in turn contributed to his development to grow as a leader within education. So I wanted to end on this kind of quote from Martin, because I really wanted to just highlight the fact that yes, this is a predominantly online course, but the blended aspect, the face-to-face aspect of this course is what really makes it stand out from the crowd. And I think it's a part of the course that you as students will really, really benefit from as well. So to wrap up, I hope you've all found today's session insightful. Alex, thank you as always for your time and for joining me. It's great. We've had a lot of engagement today in the chat function now. I am obviously based here in the UK, and I look after recruitment for our Manchester centre. So please do get in touch with me if Manchester is your location of choice and the location closest to you. You can submit your CV for an initial review, and we can have a bit of a conversation over Zoom about the course and how you can take the next steps with us. If you are based elsewhere, which I believe some of you on today's call listening live are in the world, so please get in touch with me still, but I'll direct you to the relevant kind of recruitment contacts so you can have further conversations with them. But Alex, is there anything you would like to finish with?
Just stay safe, everybody, I suppose, and thanks for coming.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you to you all, and yeah, to reiterate, stay safe, and look forward to hopefully hearing from you very soon.